Hello, my name's Stephen. This is Faith Ministries. Remember the old story, Goldilocks and the Three Bears? In the house, Goldilocks tracks down 3 dishes of porridge. And you remember that she tastes each of the bowls. She finds that the large father's bear is excessively hot, too hot to touch. The mother bear's bowl of porridge is too cold. But the baby bear's porridge is just right.
She tasted the porridge in the wee little bowl. It was just right.
Now, the Bible we're looking at today is called the Quakers Bible. And for most people at the time, and even today, it was just not quite right. It wasn't a Goldilocks Bible. It wasn't quite right. It wasn't as appetizing and appealing compared to the established King James Version that was being used at the time. Before we dig into the Bible, though, who are the Quakers? You may be a bit like me. If you live in America, I'm sure you know about the Quakers because you have them possibly as neighbors, you know where they come from, like in Pennsylvania, etc. Here in Australia, we see movies where the Quakers are mentioned, but I personally don't know any Quakers at all in my hometown or in my country itself. So who were the Quakers? They're also called the Religious Society of Friends, or Quaker movement, and it was founded in England, in the United Kingdom, in the 17th century by a guy called George Fox. Now, the first Quakers, they were basically what we would call renegade Christian group that broke away from the Church of England. And today, modern day Quakers, they live all over the world. They come from all walks of life. And interestingly, though, they espouse to a wide diversity of different beliefs. The central conviction, I believe, of Quakerism is that God, or the divine, or the light within, dwells in every man and woman. And each person can receive direct revelation and inspiration from that spiritual source. Now, back there in the 17th century, Fox and the early Quakers, they were persecuted for their beliefs because they were so different to the Catholics, so different to the Church of England, because they rejected elaborate religious ceremonies. They didn't have official clergy, no priests, no ministers, no reverends, etc. And they believed in a spiritual equality of men and women. And so because of the persecution, a lot of them headed off to the New World, over to America, and they arrived there in the mid-1650s. Interesting, though, that 1681, King Charles II, there in England, he gave William Penn, who was a wealthy English Quaker, a large grant of land in America to pay off the debt owed to his family. Now, Penn, who had been jailed multiple times because of his Quaker beliefs, he went on to found the state of Pennsylvania as a sanctuary for religious freedom and tolerance. And so within a few years, several thousand Friends or Quakers had moved to Pennsylvania from Britain. There they played an integral part over the years in both abolition of slavery, also women's rights movement. I believe from my writing that there's not a lot of Quakers in the world. I believe there's only 380,000 members around the world, and that's according to the Friends Journal that they put out in 2017. So, the Quakers Bible. Who was the guy who wrote the Quakers Bible? There's a man called Anthony Purver, who lived from 1702 to 1777. He was in England. He was a British Quaker. He was a schoolmaster by profession, but he's also known for his work in Bible translation. Therefore, the Bible, the Quaker Bible, is also referred to as the Purver's Bible. He undertook this project to provide a more accessible and understandable version of the scriptures, particularly for the Quaker community. Now, Anthony Purver was self-taught translator. It took about 30 years to undertake this project single-handedly. Failing to find interest in his publication, he eventually sold the manuscript for £1,000, which was a fair amount of money back in those days, to a guy called Dr. John Fothergill, who published the Bible at his own expense. and they had 2 volumes, and they were sold for approximately 4 guineas. So it wasn't a cheap Bible. Now, there is no evidence, I believe, of any volume of sales or received little support, no backing from the established religious society of Friends or the Quakers to which Purver belonged. And so, in essence, it basically failed. It didn't go anywhere. It was still around. It's still, some people had it and still people used it. I believe it's in museums these days. So where does the Quaker Bible actually come as far as historically goes regarding the other Bibles that we've already had a look at? Let's just have a look at this particular page. Now we can see on this particular page, we have Bibles such as the Matthew's Bible here on the left. We have the Great Bible, which we've looked at. We haven't looked at the Taverner's Bible, which is a minor revision of the Matthew's Bible, I believe. We have the Geneva Bible. We have the Bishop's Bible, the Douay-Rheims Bible. And then eventually, in 1611, we come to the King James Version. Then we have the Douay-Rheims Bible. And then 1764, so you can see it's like 100 years after the King James, we have the one we're looking at now, the Quaker Bible. And then following that, things like Thompson translations, Webster's revisions, Young's translations, Julius Smith, which we've had a look at in the past, and it goes on to the Darby, an American Standard Version, etc. So it is one of the few Bibles that came just after the King James Version. But the Quaker Bible remains as a valuable resource for those interested in lifestyle or the beliefs of Quakers, and also the history of biblical translation. So let's just have a quick look then at the Quaker Bible and what it looks like and how it reads. Here on this particular page, I'll put down the bottom the link to these particular websites, because they're basically on a play.google.com site that somebody's put together. So as you can see here, this is the beginning of the first page. It's a translation of all the books of the Old Testament with notes, critical and explanatory, by Anthony Purver. And I'll just click across briefly with introductory remarks, etc. And if you want to, you can actually go on there and read. It is written in older style English, where our S's are more in the form of an F. And so you just have to translate it in your own mind as you're reading along. So he has all these introductory remarks about the translation, how he did it, etc. And so we go to Genesis chapter 1. It says he had notes upon the Bible, critical and explanatory, notes upon the book called Genesis. And it says here that God created the heaven and the earth at the beginning. The earth, however, was vacant and void, and darkness overwhelmed the deep, but the Spirit of God hovered atop of the water. Now, I won't try and read that, but as you can see, he's got a lot of notes there to do with the beginning of Genesis and the beginning of creation. And it's possible, as you can see, if you're down the bottom here, you can just scroll across and it comes up with various chapters of the Bible. You can find your way around, like Exodus, etc. This particular one goes from Genesis right through until Psalms, I believe. And so you have all the different books in the Bible there, and you can read them. And down the bottom, he often has a lot of notes underneath. Now, if we slip over to the book of John, the Gospel of John, chapter 1, we can see here a bit easier. He says that the Word was in the beginning, and it was with God. Nay, the Word was God. He himself was with God in the beginning. All things were made by him, and without him there was not one thing made which was made. In him there was life, and there was the light of men. And again, down here we see copious amounts of notes, which we won't go into, to do with light, with Jesus being the Word, etc. And so you can see that it was basically one of the criticisms, I suppose, of the Quaker Bible, the Purver's Bible, is that it was a one-man effort. There's no checking of notes. There was no making sure that his translation was correct. So what type of translation was the Purver's or the Quaker Bible? Some people say, which is interesting, that they see it as not a direct translation, but more as a paraphrase. And in reading those particular passages we just read there, it doesn't really come across like a paraphrase like the Message Bible or the Passion Translation, etc. Others state that it's more of a literal translation, which means it has a lot of notes, explanations, and why some theologians or ministers at the time said it was too stodgy, it could bog down in detail. It was hard to read. It didn't flow like it was just, maybe it was too literal. One of the key points also that, as people, I believe, if you read all the notes or some of the notes in that it was very much a Quaker Bible. It was very much influenced by his denomination, by his thoughts, his beliefs, etc. Emphasizing things like inner spiritual experience, simplicity of language, and a focus on social justice and ethical living. Some of the discrepancies or the errors that some people, particularly Protestant churches, would find with the Quaker Bible is things like their emphasis on the interpretation of inner light, where the Quakers emphasize the concept of inner light, interpreting as a direct awareness of God's presence and guidance within each individual. Also, as I said before, Quakers hold a non-sacramental view of religious ordinance. They don't go along with baptism, they don't go along with communion, and they don't go along with having clergy or ministers or priests, etc., over them. While the available information about Anthony Purver is somewhat limited, his work on the Bible reflects his commitment to making the scriptures more accessible and understandable within the Quaker community and beyond, which is commendable in itself. A lot of other translators over the years have attempted the same thing. They've tried to make it more readable for the people, translating it basically, like, for example, from Latin into English to make it available to ordinary people. So overall, Anthony Purver's Bible, or the Quaker Bible, it represented an attempt to bridge the gap between the language of the 18th century, the King James Bible, etc., and the biblical text, with a particular emphasis upon the Quaker values and interpretations. While it's not as widely known or influential as other translations at the time and following, it does hold a significance, I believe, historically and within the Quaker community. And as I said, offers insights into their religion and into the linguistic landscape at the time. So it's an interesting Bible sitting there in the 1700s. And we've looked at a lot of different Bibles during this time, or flowing on from there, from the time of King James Bible, etc. So that's the Quaker Bible, or the Anthony Purver's Bible, written mainly for the Quaker community there at the time in England and in Pennsylvania in America. I hope you enjoyed this short video about the Quaker Bible, and if you did, please like, subscribe, and share so more people may see it. Until next time, God bless.